They stole my water. Not a bucket. Not a little overflow 15,000 gallons straight out of my tank, gone like somebody had decided my supply was theirs to take, and they did it while I was away. I came back to the ranch, wiped the gauge with the heel of my hand, and that hollow in my chest told me before my brain did something had been tampered with. I'd been in Abilene a week at a cattle auction trying to get ahead of the dry season. Before I left, I topped off the north tank like I always do, slow and steady pulling from the well I paid to drill 10 years ago, and that tank wasn't just water. It was security. It was insurance against heat, against fire. The thin line between cattle and carcasses out here on 62 acres of hard country where the sun bakes the topsoil and the wind never quits. 5 years earlier, the land east of my fence got sold and up went Silver Meadow Estates, neat houses, sidewalks, rows of ornamental pears. At first, I tried to be neighborly. A few folks brought store-bought pies, asked about coyotes, smiled like everyone does when they want to belong. Then the HOA arrived in the form of Lorraine Whitaker's sharp haircut, immaculately clean Lexus. She came out one afternoon worried about wildfire county response time, sensible things, until they stopped being sensible. Lorraine asked if they could tie a small emergency line into my tank for fire suppression. No sprinklers, just a backup, strictly emergency use, she said. We walked the fence, shook hands, and I agreed to a narrow line with a manual valve on my side. No paperwork, just a handshake. Maybe that was my first mistake. For years, nothing happened, so I barely thought about that pipe. So when I rolled back and saw the north tank reading bone dry, the air hotter than it should be for morning, and a fresh trench running from the base of the tank toward the eastern fence, the cold landed in my stomach. The soil was still loose, shovel marks clean. I followed the trench and saw where they'd cut under the fence, neat as you please. And on the other side, a thick PVC line ran toward Silver Meadow. I climbed through the gate and heard the ridiculous ticking of sprinkler heads popping up. Lawns shimmered green under a steady mist, flower beds blooming like it was spring in Georgia instead of a Texas drought. They hadn't just tapped my water, they'd built an irrigation system. An envelope in my mail explained it all in HOA language. For the benefit of the Silver Meadow community, we have connected to your water supply to ensure our landscaping remains compliant with county drought guidelines and maintains property values. Connected as if my well were a utility. No ask, no apology, just assumption. Property values. I laughed once, short and humorless. My stock tank was empty and my cattle were one hot afternoon from real trouble. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. I'd shrugged off small slights, the notes about dust from my tractor, the emails complaining about feed delivery at 6 a.m. But this was different. Someone had reached across my fence and decided my water belonged to them. They thought I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. I didn't charge over the decorative gate. My father used to say, when somebody does you wrong, make sure you're standing on solid ground before you take a step forward. So I called Caleb at the county water office, old high school teammate who knows wells permits, all the boring paperwork that suddenly matters. Caleb pulled records while I was still on the line. My well was private agricultural use, registered in my name, maintained at my expense, no easements, no shared access. As far as the county was concerned, that water belonged to me. I shut off the main valve, locked it with a heavy brass padlock I use on the equipment shed, and posted fresh no trespassing signs along the fence. Then I waited. It didn't even take a day. My phone lit up. Cynthia Pratt, HOA secretary, clipped and professional, called about disruption in water flow affecting our irrigation systems. An attorney called. A couple homeowners called. One man lectured me about his wife's prize roses like my cattle were an afterthought. But not everybody was on the warpath. Travis, a young guy who'd moved in last year, called quiet and embarrassed. They told us it was an approved community water solution. He said like the words weren't his. That stuck with me. Someone had framed this as cooperation, not theft. Grant Holloway, the new HOA president, came by in a spotless SUV, mid-40s, perfect teeth polos with the subdivision logo stitched over his heart. He put on a smile in a patient tone. You can't just shut off the supply, he said. We've invested resources in irrigation based on prior agreements. There was no agreement. A handshake years ago for fire emergencies was not carte blanche to dig a trench and siphon 15,000 gallons. When I asked what would resolve it, he suggested negotiation. When I named a contract, usage limits, and payment, he blinked. Payment startled him. "We can't set a precedent of paying private landowners for utilities," he said. "Fine," I told him, "tear it out." He threatened injunctions. I filed a sheriff's report for trespass and property damage, dug out photos of the trench, documented the cut under the fence. And then I did what ranchers do when polite talk fails. I called the local news. Out here, the town tends to back the man with dirt on his hands. I didn't spin a yarn. I showed the trench, the empty tank, the letter. The segment ran that evening, plain and clean, private well drained to supply a subdivision. By day 3, the subdivision's sheen began to fade. Lawns went patchy, sprinkler heads sat useless. At Miller's Feed and Supply, people who'd been quiet started whispering. An older woman named Etta, who'd always been polite at the seed racks, found me and said, "We trusted the board. We didn't know." That kind of honesty shifted things from anger to accountability. Then came a twist I hadn't expected. The contractor came back, not to hide, but to tell the truth. Hank the foreman handed me a crumpled set of work orders and said the board had told them to expedite installation. Nobody on the contractor's side had double-checked property lines. He looked like a man who'd been told to build and then find forgiveness later. That little admission, a crooked work order, and instruction to hurry, made the story smell worse for the HOA. Under mounting pressure, Grant returned with 2 board members, faces less polished, shoulders heavier. "We want to make this right," he said. They volunteered to remove the line, restore the property, issue a written apology. That was a start, but undoing the damage felt like a bandage, not accountability. They had shown how they viewed my land as a resource to be managed for aesthetics, and I wanted the consequence to stick the lesson without being needlessly cruel. So I put my terms on paper. Meter installation at their expense, monthly inspections, a strict usage cap, and payment, $5,000 a month, adjusted annually for drought severity. Miss a payment, exceed the cap by 1 gallon, and the valve locks, no warnings. Grant flipped through the folder, jaw tightening. Cynthia sniffed and said I'd be profiting. "I'm protecting my ranch," I told her. The money would pay for pump upgrades, a secondary tank, better monitoring, things I already intended to do, but could now afford without feeling like I had to beg for security. They could have walked away. They could have refused and watched their lawns brown. Instead, the board voted under pressure from those same homeowners who'd been surprised by the trench and signed. The contractor returned under my supervision to install a proper meter junction, remove the unauthorized line, and level the ground. The first check arrived the following week. Holding it felt strange vindication folded with responsibility. In the months after, I used the money exactly as I said I would. Upgraded the pump, added a secondary storage tank on the south end, installed monitoring so I'd never be blind to what was happening on my own land again. Some homeowners changed too. Travis and a few others started asking about native plantings and how to live with the land instead of trying to force a non-native lawn into the dust. Grant stopped mentioning property values with the same zeal. Once he had to answer to the people he'd been answerable to, all along his language shifted. Still, there are nights those doubts sit with you. Sometimes when I walk the east fence and the wind cuts my face, I think about a harder path, locking the valve forever and letting them learn in the heat. Would that have been cleaner justice? Maybe. But then I remember Etta in Miller's Feed, the worry on her face, and Travis caught between a board and a lawn he didn't plant with his own hands. Not everyone who benefits from a wrong is a schemer. Sometimes people trust leaders who betray that trust. If there's a lesson, it isn't a sermon, but a bruise that teaches. Boundaries matter. Paper matters. Enforcement changes behavior faster than a lecture. People will step over a line when they think their need outweighs your ownership unless you show them otherwise. I got paid for every drop they took. Yes, but the truer thing is, this drawing a clear line without malice changed how those folks thought about my land. So they stole my water, and in the end they paid for every drop. I'm not celebrating spite. I'm satisfied the line got drawn, and for now it holds. What would you have done in my boots? Shut them out completely and let them feel the drought, or turn the problem into leverage the way I did? Was charging them the right move, or should I have let them taste the consequences and called that justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your HOA stories. And if you've ever had someone treat your hard work like community property, tell me how you handled it. Like if you believe in standing your ground, subscribe. if you want more real stories, and I'll see you in the next one.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.